Everybody, how's it going? So in this video I was going to show you how to cut one of these timber frame posts. Now a post typically has a lot going on. They're very important. Obviously they transfer the weight of the timber frame all the way from the roof down into the foundation. Your tie beams tying into them. So there's a really important dovetailed tenon on the end of those tie beams that goes all the way through the post. You can see that here on the back side. And there's a big wedge that seats that dovetail tenon from the tie beam. There's a bunch of knee braces in it. And on the front side of where the tie beam connects, there is a shelf that helps carry the weight of the tie beam rather than it just being supported by the tenon. You also have some rim beams tying into that, so there's pockets for those. At the top, there's a tenon where the rafter plate sits on top of. So there's a lot going on in a timber frame post, and I'm gonna show you how I cut it. After I've inspected the timber and picked out which faces I want facing the inside of the house, I do a rough eyeballing to figure out where I want my joinery to land so that I avoid as many knots as possible. It's not always possible to avoid knots, but giving this some thought up front can definitely help save you some headaches. Then the first thing I'm going to do is cut the bottom perfectly square, and I kind of do a hybrid method here of making my first cut exactly to my line using my 16-inch circular saw. I take special care to set the saw perfectly square, and as you can see, it cuts perfectly to my line, but then I'm going to finish cutting by hand. I cut the rest by hand because for whatever reason, and no matter how well I set my circular saw up, it's usually very difficult to make another cut on the other side with that circular saw and get both of those cuts to line up perfectly. But when I finish the cut with a handsaw, it only takes about a minute, and I never really have any problems getting a nice square cut. The circular saw does speed up the process, but I often make this cut entirely by hand. It just depends on how I'm feeling at the moment and what kind of time crunch I might be in. Once the bottom is cut square, I can now begin laying out all my joinery, and I'm going to use the bottom as my reference point to pull all my measurements from.
Boots. What are you doing? Get to work, dude.
Alright, so first here is our brace pocket. I'm going to line my square up to my tick mark there. Remember, it's 2 inches in from the north face. So I can make a little tick mark here. It's 2 inches wide. I can make a tick mark, but I know the blade of my square is also 2 inches wide, and that's what I'll end up using to lay this out. But that shows me where I can do my shoulder line right here, my knife line at the bottom of that. Come up to the top of this brace pocket, my other tick mark's right there. Line my square up. Nice deep knife line. And then I can just register the blade along this side because I know it's 2 inches in from this face. I don't even need to measure that with a tick mark. It makes it really convenient. There's one. Then I can just slide my blade up, line it up with that line I just made. And do my other side. Go. Then just darken that in. It's always a good idea to label what it is, so right, brace, pocket, and then it's also 3.5 inches deep. For the tenon on top of the post, I set my circular saw depth to match the tenon cheek and make 3 cuts. I stay a 1/16 away from my shoulder line this time, and for any joinery, I always will stay back about a 1/16 of an inch and then finish to my line using chisels and slicks. I'm going to break away the majority of the waste using my chisel, and then I'll ease up to my line by paring away the final bit with a slick. This is a 1 1/8 inch deep pocket for a rim beam, and I've used routers to remove waste for these, and I've made relief cuts with circular saws, but neither of those methods really saved me a lot of time, and they're just way louder, messier, more dangerous, and really not enjoyable. I often use power tools to speed certain things up, but in this case, the power tools don't really make it worth the extra hassle, so typically I just cut these pockets out with a chisel. Now this is the really important angled support shelf that the tie beam sits in. I use a circular saw to cut the shelf line and remove the rest of the waste using just chisels and slicks, but I'll often turn the post on each side and use my large 16-inch circular saw along that angled cut to remove bulk waste, and then I'll still finish that last 16th by hand. Now the final steps on any piece is to plane it and then oil it. And these are a couple clips from the timber frame classes I taught last year where we're planing and oiling the final pieces. If you're interested in taking a timber frame class with me, I did post a link to that information down in the description for some upcoming classes I'm teaching in the spring, summer of 2025. So hopefully I'll see you there. If not, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.